Hi, this is Casio and you're watching Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV.
G'day guys and welcome to the Purebred Reds Adelaide United Fan TV. I'm your host Ellis Gelios and I've got a special guest with me today, long-time Adelaide United fan Max Joy. We're here today to preview the game against Melbourne City on Sunday, as well as talk about a whole range of different things. It's been a very busy week going on in the world of the A-League. Just to begin with, Max, why don't you tell us a little bit about your time as a fan of Adelaide United, your earliest memories of the club, and going to Hindmarsh and everything that you can associate with being a Reds fan.
Yeah, easy. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
My first memory would probably be back in the old Richie Allegich era.
You're winding it all the way back.
All the way back.
Yeah.
I remember Dad got us tickets ages ago when I was probably 12 or 13 back then.
Right.
And yeah, back in those days, the old Robbie Cornthwaite, Valkanis era, that was definitely my earliest memories, and then kind of got back into it. Certainly always been a long time Eugene Lekovic fan, being a goalkeeper myself.
Yeah, I was going to mention that a little bit later.
And then I've been a member for a few years, but yeah, always been there.
Beautiful. I've actually got a bit of a memory. Back in, I think it was my year 11, FIFA had just come out. You'd made a Facebook status about it, and I was still out and I hadn't bought a copy yet, and I was really, because they used to always stuff around with our kits in the early FIFAs, because we'd always release our kit like a week before the season would start, and obviously the game had been completely developed in that, and so they'd always get little things wrong with the kit. And I remember asking on Facebook, have they got our kit right? And I remember you replying and you were just like, nah, they screwed it up.
They always used to screw it up.
They didn't put the names at the back, and I was just like, oh, and that was our best kit. That was the Araya kit, which I really rated highly. So that's a bit of a memory I've got going a long way back with you as Adelaide United fans. Just moving along quickly, we'll just touch on the victory game. So for me, obviously the 2-0 loss, for me, I was pretty happy with the manner of the defeat. If you go back to past trips, particularly at Etihad, like I mentioned last week, you know, we do often get quite humiliated there, and we pretty much stuck to our guns for a large portion of the game. I think Kurz was tactically organised, changed the formation in a way that really was able to suffocate the victory midfield, and you didn't see much of Honda or any of those guys getting in behind early on. It took a bit of Jordan Elsie probably not being reactive enough to a great save from Izzo for victory to break through. But would you agree, Max, probably over the course of the game, definitely improved signs, and of course, given that we don't have a fit striker, you know, you couldn't say too many bad things about it.
Yeah, the lack of strikers really come to bite us in recent weeks, I think.
Yes.
It's something that really showed against Victory. I think we didn't really have a target to any of our attacks, and it just left us kind of running up front with not a lot to do.
Yeah. I just want to ask you quickly, as you are a goalkeeper, Paul Izzo, since the pre-season and the end of last season, has he improved quite drastically? He's been probably one of our most unsung heroes.
I think he's probably in our top 3 players, and I think Izzo's development in probably the last 5 years has been like skyrocketing. I think he's probably the best, for me, the best goalkeeper in the league. He saves us a lot of times when we kind of, especially Elsie, kind of has a tendency to switch off in recent weeks. But he's, I think, always ready to pull off the spectacular, and it's been very consistent, especially. So
yeah, I think that's all very true. I think maybe one thing you can work a little bit on is just when he's under pressure, his distribution can be a bit worrying at times. But let's not forget, he's still young, and it's proving like it was pretty much a masterstroke to move Eugene on when we did, albeit we didn't do it in the right way. But it's probably bringing Izzo back from the Mariners, and given that he had that one season there where they were just defensively so awful, they were conceding 3 or 4 every week, and he was in goals most of that time. To think that he's managed to put that behind him, and now he's performing as well as he is.
It's like a different player from that season to the first season.
And he's got a pretty high ceiling on him, so I'm almost a little bit worried that we might not be able to cling on to him too much more beyond this season. But that's a discussion for another day.
Definitely.
We'll just go through the quick ins and outs for both teams. So ins for us, some pretty valuable ones, especially Taylor Regan comes back from suspension, Ryan Kiddo also returns, and Ken Ilso, who's a massive in for us. The worrying one is that Stamatolopoulos is out with a quad concern, and the unavailables for Adelaide, Bubba Diawara, George Blackwood, who I'm told by a source is returning in 2 weeks. So that's promising. Lockie Brook and Mirko Boland also unavailable. For Melbourne City, the ins, Richie Delat, not one that I want to hear about there because he's been great so far this season for them. Aussie Malik, a name we know all too well. Young fullback Dylan Pearce, and the outs for City, Curtis Good, who got a red card on his debut last week, which is a little bit sad for him, but probably good for us. Unavailable for them is Michael O'Halloran and Florian Berengay. Just quickly touching on the importance of the fact that Ken Ilso is in when there's no Stammer. I'm going to ask you this a little bit later on, but just quickly touching on it, obviously missing a clear goal scorer in that lineup, so it's key that Ilso's there, who can play as a striker, and then Kiddo also coming back, who I really rated against Brisbane Roar.
He's been spectacular the last 2 weeks. Ryan Kiddo.
Yeah, he has. Yeah, and I don't know why, but he may be one of these players that gets a lot of soft tissue injuries, because he seems to miss a lot of games when he doesn't get clear injuries on the pitch. So I don't know what's going on there. Moving through to the stats just quickly. Obviously Melbourne City coming in at a much later stage than most other A-League teams, so historically we haven't played them as many times, but we've beaten them more times than we've lost or drawn. We've had 11 wins against them, they've beaten us 9 times, and there's been 6 draws between the two sides. We've scored 42 goals and they've scored 40. So we'll just get straight into the key points, Max. Lots to talk about. First one that I want to ask you about, lots of negativity surrounding Melbourne City at the moment with the manager Warren Joyce, and the fact he's not picking Bruno Fornaroli in the team and not really giving any reasons why. Now what I want to ask you, they're coming off a loss against Perth. They've been really quite underwhelming this season, and when you throw in the lack of Bruno Fornaroli being chosen in the team, among the fact that they're just not playing good football, full stop, does it almost feel like they're due for the performance of a lifetime this weekend? And is that the one thing we've got to worry about?
I think with Richie Delat returning, we should definitely be careful. But I feel the negativity around the Fornaroli and Joyce controversy is also affecting the other players, from what it seems like. It's kind of spread out across the dressing room. So Fornaroli has been pretty vocal about it, or seemingly pretty vocal about it, and I can imagine that causing some issues behind the scenes, which kind of has had a tendency to reflect in their performances.
So I mean, it feels like they're either going to come here and put on this amazing performance which really turns the tide for them, or they're just going to explode and get done, and maybe Warren Joyce gets sacked, because you feel like at the moment, given it's the City Football Group, everything they stand for, it's just really below what the expectations and the bar was set, you know, with what they're delivering. So and the fact that it's mind-boggling. Like, I mean, you can understand if he doesn't want to choose Bruno Fornaroli because of the fact he doesn't think he's fit enough or whatever, then fine. But the thing is, like, they literally do not have any other presence up forward. They've got wide players who are traditional wide players in that very sense, and you can just see how it affects them. And it's just mind-boggling that he's not being picked, not even on the bench. Like, you know, as a last resort. Like, it's just... there
was the rumour because he tried to force a move to Sydney.
Yeah, but that happened during the off season,
which
so I mean,
it should be well and done by now.
Yeah, I would have thought they would have, you know, put that aside and just tried to make do with the fact that, okay, you know, you are as good as you are, just play as well as you can for us for the rest of the year, and then we'll organise a transfer at the end of the season.
Yeah,
it's all good for us anyway. It plays into our hands, you'd think. What I want to ask you next, does this sort of feel like it's becoming our next biggest rivalry? Because as we know, Melbourne City, they've gotten so many of our players over the past few years. There's people that call them like Adelaide United version 2.0. The fact they are a Victorian side, so there's that other, you know, rivalry that you take into account, the cross-border rivalry. And you know, there has been a lot of tension between us and them. There's been finals encounters, it feels like this is really becoming maybe where the Melbourne Victory rivalry is 10 years from now.
Yeah,
you know,
I completely agree. I think the amount of ex-Adelaide United players that have transitioned, I think it's 5 or 6 at least.
Oh, I think it's over time. It's been nearly a team.
Yeah, it's been even especially like club legends like Eugene Galekovic going there, and people who played for years, like Osama Malik, and people who we've got a connection with, like Bruce Kamau winning a championship and things like that, going over really ties the connection between the two, and I can see it getting pretty fiery as it has been the last few times. So
there's also, people might not know too much or remember too much, but there's been a lot of backroom staff who have gone there as well. We've had people in just general sort of positions behind the scenes at Adelaide move to Melbourne City, and our ex-CEO Michael Petrillo, who did so much at Adelaide United, now the CEO there at Melbourne City. So there's been a lot of people that have left Adelaide and gone to City, and it's just added to what you would assume becomes maybe the next big rivalry for Adelaide, if the Victory one peters out of it. Anyway, is Ryan Joyce losing it?
I definitely think he is.
Yeah,
I don't see him surviving to the end of the season at this rate. I think the Fornaroli saga is, from an outsider's perspective, making it look like he's losing the rest of the players. I think if he survives it to the end of the season, I'd be very surprised. So
just moving along, in terms of how we line up, there's no AP, there's no Bubba Diawara, there's no George Blackwood. So with Ken Ilso coming back into the team, is it logical that he becomes the number 9 to start with, or do you go with Ryan Halloran, who's also been used there at times so far this season?
I think we put Ken Ilso at the front. It worked quite well against Wellington.
Yes.
When he got a brace, so you can't really argue with that. And he looked a lot more threatening. And I also think Halloran, for all his engine and all his running, is a lot more effective on the right.
Does the team therefore pick itself if you go with Ilso at 9?
I think if Ilso's fit enough to play 90, then
Okay, I'd probably agree. The other one I want to ask you about in relation to how we line up, in terms of our centre-back pairing, Regan's back, and between Elsie and Jakobsen, we haven't seen many clean sheets so far this season. Individually, they're both quite good, but I thought Regs, you know, when he came in, he adds that little bit of passion.
Definitely.
He seems a bit more hungry at times. So I don't really know, you know, what does he do now? Because a lot of people are big Taylor Regan fans, and I know for a fact that if he continues to not be picked ahead of the other two, he will be off. There's no question about it. One of the new expansion clubs will probably pick him up. So, or a Mariners or something like that. So, there's probably a little bit of, like, not pressure, but, you know, people who will maybe question if he continues not to be picked. Is this a sort of Watergate moment for him, where maybe he does start, puts in a really good performance, and then Marco has got big headaches with which centre-backs he uses?
I think at the moment, given a few of Jordan Elsie's recent performances, I would pick Taylor Regan over Jordan Elsey.
So you try Elsie and Jakobsen?
No, Regan and Jakobsen.
Regan and Jakobsen, sorry, which hasn't really, I don't think it's been used.
No.
Hasn't been tried so far this year. So, it's a big call. Jordan Elsey, for me, not here to rag on him or anything, but I think the difference between him and a player who has his qualities that will end up in Europe is the fact that a player that has his qualities who would end up in Europe ordinarily doesn't have this sort of switch off moments in their locker that Jordan may or may not have, but depending on what your opinion is. But for me, certainly sometimes he can freeze up a bit at crucial moments, and unfortunately when it happens in a crucial moment, people remember it. So
I get kind of David Luiz, Jordan Elsey vibes in the sense that massive brain fades that can at times cost you a game, but they can also be at times great, but it's that trade-off of which one you want to take.
I agree wholeheartedly. Not to say that he's not a good defender, he's a very good defender.
Definitely.
Will the return of Riley haunt us? He's been their only good player, really, so far this season, if you don't count Richie Talat, who's a fullback. So
I hope not. But I can see him kind of running rings around us in the way that he's notorious for. But with the lack of Fornaroli, it's a bit too much for greater shoulder.
Puts a lot of expectation on him to stand out, doesn't it? So that's pretty much everything from the key point segment. Just moving into some news, and it's mainly good news. Isaías citizenship finally coming through yesterday. Does this mean that in January, in your opinion, we may look to exercise the fact that we have an extra visa spot and pick up another overseas player?
I think we should. And I think we should go for someone like Bobo. Someone who's seemingly available and has proven in the A-League significantly. So there was obviously the story that came out that we might sign him, which annoyingly for me came out right after I filmed last week when I said that I doubt we'll look for anyone in January, and then the story came out that we are looking at Bobo. Now Sydney are going to have cap issues if they go and try and sign him again, and most of the other clubs that he would look to move to are also pretty filled up with their cap space. So if we want to put the money out there, then I think it's something that can happen for us, and I'm sure everyone would really not be looking to oppose bringing someone in, a proven goal scorer, which hinders us. The lack of hinders us so much. Also the rumour that Borussia
is the other one. True.
Apparently Sydney was also looking at him, but I can't see how Sydney would have cap space for that. I don't know how I'd feel having Borussia at the club.
And I was going to ask from his end as well. He scored so many against us. Would he?
And he's always seemed to hate us. And I really hate him.
And we all were so glad to see the back of him.
Let's put it lightly.
The other news of the past week surrounding Adelaide United is the fact that Marco Kurz in January will enter the last 6 months of his contract. We have no idea what goes on in that boardroom, what they're thinking, but I'm going to go out there and say that the power is firmly in his court.
Definitely.
He could afford to almost go on and have a bad last 3 months with us and still be headhunted by all the big clubs, I think, because of the fact that on a small, or one of the smallest budgets in the league, he's managed to win an FFA Cup, make the finals, and have us in really good shape this season in just 2 years of being in the country. I think he's going to have the likes of Sydney knocking on his door, and I think it would be unwise for him to rush himself into a contract negotiation this early, because we need him so much more than he needs us. That's how it looks from the outside. Do you think, though, that there's a real issue with the fact that if Kurz doesn't get re-signed, the 12 players that are uncontracted in 6 months' time at Adelaide United are going to sit on their hands and wait to see what happens, and then obviously the possibility is there that they'll get picked up easily by the clubs?
No, I definitely think so. I think a lot of the players really like Kurz. That's kind of the vibe that they really give off and the club gives off. And I think the replacement for Kurz is the big point. It would need to be someone in the line of Guillermo or someone like that who could entice the players to stay and be excited about the prospect of the future.
So you're saying another big name to come in?
I think it would, to replace Kurz, especially with the coaches we've had in recent years, would be necessary to kind of convince the players that it's not just going to be downhill if he left, especially with our budget issues.
There is a bit of talk from certain people who may or may not be associated to Adelaide United that the club obviously doesn't want to lose him, but at the same time, having an Australian coach come in solves a lot of headaches because of the fact that European managers have such high expectations, and in South Australia we are like the 4th biggest club. Football's not the biggest code here. For instance, just the smallest things matter, like, you know, in a training session 4 or 5 balls get lost. In Europe that just gets written straight off and then you get balls replaced the next day. Here it would be a matter of like, okay, we've got to talk to this person about it. Like, you know, we can't just go out and spend the money tomorrow. And those kinds of small things, I think, for someone who's ambitious and played at the highest level, they get irritated.
Definitely.
You know,
it's almost amateurish compared to what they're used to. So.
Yeah, and the other thing is he's obviously in such a good position to ask for so much more money if he is to resign. And do we have, or do we want to put more money into the coach's contract than what we already are? So it's worrying, put it that way. At this point, it seems like a worry. Now I'm going to ask you, Max, our key player on the day, Sunday 6:30 kickoff versus theirs.
I'm going to go Ken also.
Ken also for us and for City. Who's our key player?
Probably McGree.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, I can't see why that would not be the case. Final prediction?
I'm going to go 2-1 us.
2-1?
Yeah.
Hopefully. I'm going to say that we will draw 1-1. I think we'll be in control most of the game. We'll score first and they'll get one back. Towards the end of the game, it'll just be another shit sort of endings to a game that we should have won. Frustrating towards the end. I think I can feel that happening. I hope I'm wrong. Now let's just quickly touch on the fact that yesterday we had some groundbreaking news for the A-League. 2 new clubs announced to enter the league over the next 2 years, starting with Western Melbourne next season. Now, Max, this of course means that for Adelaide United supporters, potentially another 2 away trips to Melbourne to add to the others that we usually get in a year. Was this a good move to bring Western Melbourne in first of all, or would you have gone with one of the other 2 Melbourne options, which was South Melbourne and Team 11? Team 11 based in a similar region to South Melbourne, but Western Melbourne obviously from the sort of much further away, sort of Geelong kind of region, which is where they're going to play, we understand, at least for the first few seasons before they get a stadium arranged. Are you happy with this? Yes or no?
I personally was never a fan of these kind of fabricated kind of conglomerate clubs, franchise clubs. I was definitely throughout the whole process, my initial pick was Wollongong, just because of the development, the fan base, the things they've already got there. And then it was South Melbourne because they've got the passion, they've got the supporters, they've got
pre-established fan base.
It's a pre-established fan. It's not. I think we'll see, especially with West Melbourne, and a bit of a struggle initially with fans. Like City struggled for years with very low turnout, and they still are. I think they're oversaturating the Melbourne markets, the Melbourne and Sydney markets. I would have much preferred to see a Canberra team, to see some actual expansion, not just more flooding the big cities.
They were also my pick instead of the Sydney bid that got accepted. But I'll just make 2 points on what you've said. First of all, I think the difference that we can hope for between City and this new Melbourne team that comes in is the fact that Melbourne City are not geographically based anywhere. So what was the selling point? Like, maybe if you hate Victory and you really wanted to support an A-League club, that was literally the only reason to support City. Whereas Western Melbourne will be representing a region, which hopefully, you know, is the one good reason why they've gone for Western Melbourne. And also, we did hear that the 2 clubs, Western Melbourne and South Sydney, both put a lot of money at the last hour into their bids, which was lacking in the other 2, in the other bids that weren't accepted. So have these been effectively bought and not won on merit?
It seems like it. It seems, well, like I was reading the West Melbourne kind of thing, the write-up yesterday, and they're letting fans choose the crest, the colours, the kits, everything. And my kind of concern with things like that, and that franchise kind of lack of soul club, is that they don't even have an established fan base to pick those kind of things. There's nothing to base it off. It's just, unless you kind of piggyback off things like Geelong, the footy club and stuff like that, they've not got enough to go off. I think it seems, as the FFA always seems to have problems lingering in the shadows, another one of those kind of, that haven't really thought it through. They've just kind of gone, oh look, we can develop these, well, instead of promoting an existing club.
Very well said. For me it was a case of, I think South Melbourne should have got the nod in Melbourne, and I think Canberra was the logical other choice, not to make another Sydney team. Saturating the Sydney market, I think they should have gone with Canberra because it's an untapped market. There's no other sport that's going to compete there. They've got the stadia. And there's players who have come out of Canberra that have gone on to play for the Socceroos, like Ned Zelic, and other big names. So it just seemed, and Calvaleri's the other one, sorry. So it just seemed like Canberra really were pretty unlucky not to get a call up, but it is what it is. Now, just to wrap, how good's our new logo? Put it out a few days ago. Hopefully everyone's gotten around that, and we do want to just give a quick shout out to Ciano Media and the people there that did that for us. There's lots of new and exciting content coming out your way over the Christmas and festive period. We're going to try to do a lot more shows that have a specific purpose and focus, rather than just the preview and the fan cams that are usually going out. So if you have suggestions or any sort of topics that you want us to cover in relation to absolutely anything, it doesn't have to be relevant at the current moment. It can be something historical about the club, or something like, do you want to see Macron still producing our kits in the next year from now? No, I think everyone's dying for a Nike or Adidas, but we won't get into that now.
Although the Remembrance Day kit was nice.
It was.
That's the only nice thing they've done, really.
That's a good shout. Other than that, been great having you on, Max.
Thanks for having me.
Hope we see you out at plenty more games this year, and good luck with everything you do in the goalkeeping world. Very much the Pembroke Eugene Galekovic, as I like to refer to you. Other than that, it's been great bringing you another show. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube, like the page on Facebook, and share things as often as possible as well, because we're really trying to get our name out there. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Cheers, guys.